Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the hall was how quiet it got. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. 100 pairs of eyes, engineers, investors, executives, turned to look at me like I had wandered in through the wrong door. My name is Elena Drayton. I am 36 years old, and for the first time in 6 years, I was standing in front of the project I once helped design, the Aquila 1. The vessel's mock-up sat in the center of the hall, a sleek steel-gray silhouette under the bright lights. I used to dream about seeing it completed, but as I stood there, clutching the lanyard I'd been given at check-in, the stares told me I didn't belong. Then I saw him, Admiral Victor Drayton, my father, at the head of the room, standing like a monument. The medals on his chest glinted under the lights, but it was his expression that caught me, that same cold, carved look he'd given me since I was a child. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked at me like I was a problem he hadn't ordered. "Elena," he said, his voice sharp enough to slice through the air, "you have no clearance to be here." The words landed like a slap. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced myself to keep walking. "I was invited," I said. "I'm here to observe the final unveiling." "Observe?" He laughed once, a short, cruel sound. "You walked away from this project. You don't get to come back here and act like you're part of it." I felt every pair of eyes on me again. Some people were whispering, others were just staring openly. My father took a step closer, his jaw tightening. "You will leave," he said, his voice dropping lower, heavier. "This is not your place anymore." The humiliation hit hard, like I was 9 years old again, standing in his office while he told me that being almost right was the same as being wrong. I could feel my face heat up. 2 security officers had stepped forward. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him that I had as much right to be there as anyone, but the words stuck. My father's approval had always been just out of reach, and even now, that old fear of disappointing him clenched in my stomach. Then a calm voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary, Admiral." The room went quiet. Marcus Renwick, the CEO of Oceanus Technologies, had risen from the stage. His gaze shifted from my father to me. "Miss Drayton isn't just welcome here," he said. "She's the reason the Aquila 1's pressure stabilization system works at all." A ripple went through the room. People looked at me differently now, not like an intruder, but like someone they were supposed to remember. Marcus walked toward me, his tone steady and deliberate. "Elena designed the original system. Without her, we wouldn't have a vessel to unveil. She will be leading the final adjustments before our next test." I blinked. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. My father's face darkened. "This is absurd," he snapped. "I won't—" "You don't have to," Marcus said, cutting him off with surprising authority. "Elena has my full authorization, effective immediately." The room was silent again, but now I felt every stare like a current of electricity. I took a breath, lifted my chin, and walked past my father toward the vessel. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a shadow of Admiral Victor Drayton's legacy. I was someone who had earned her place, even if I had to take it back by force. I grew up in a house where silence weighed more than words. Admiral Victor Drayton believed in order, precision, and discipline, the kind that left no room for warmth. When I was a kid, I used to watch other children run to their fathers with messy drawings or crooked science fair projects, and I would wonder if my father ever smiled like that. I don't think he did. My mother was the only soft voice in that house. She smelled of lavender soap and always found a way to sneak me cookies after dinner, even when I hadn't finished my math homework. But she died when I was 9. Pneumonia. The night before she passed, she held my hand and whispered something I've never forgotten. "Don't let him make you earn love. You already deserve it." After she was gone, the silence in our home hardened. My father's way of showing care was through critique. I'd bring home a science project I spent weeks perfecting, and he'd glance at it once and say, "It's fine," but fine is not good enough. "Don't be clever, be correct." Those 4 words became the drumbeat of my childhood. I started working with my hands early, not because I loved it at first, but because I wanted him to notice me. I'd take apart the toaster, the washing machine, even his old radio, just to see how they worked. By the time I was 13, I was building model turbines and experimenting with water pressure systems for school competitions. I won regional science fairs, robotics championships, and even an early scholarship for a naval engineering camp. He never attended any of it, not once. Instead, He'd leave a note on the kitchen table. Do better next time. It didn't matter that I'd already beaten 20 other kids or built something that judges called ingenious. If it wasn't perfect, it wasn't worth mentioning. By the time I graduated high school, I was obsessed with precision, not because I loved the feeling of success, but because I feared failure would make me invisible. Every blueprint I drew, every calculation I ran, I did it like my life depended on it. Some nights, I'd lie awake thinking about my mother's words, wondering if she'd recognize the girl I'd become. I doubted she would. I wasn't chasing curiosity anymore. I was chasing approval from a man who never gave it. That hunger for validation, and the perfectionism that came with it, built the foundation for who I am. It's why I designed the original pressure stabilization system for the Aquila One. I needed to create something flawless, something that even my father couldn't dismiss. 6 years ago, I stood in the Aquila design bay, staring at a blueprint that made my stomach knot. It was Adrian's proposal, a propulsion model that, on paper, looked ambitious, but I saw what no one else wanted to see. The thermal compression curve wasn't stable. Under extreme trench pressures, the core engine would choke on its own heat load. Adrian, I said, trying to keep my voice even, this won't hold past 6,000 meters. The pressure ratio's wrong. Adrian Trent, my father's stepson, leaned back in his chair, smirking like I'd just told a bad joke. You're overthinking it again, Elena. That's your problem. You always get lost in theoretical models instead of trusting the real-world results. My father stood just behind him, arms crossed, silent but watchful. I turned to him, expecting some sort of backup. Dad, the calculations don't lie. If we push this design, the vessel could suffer thermal collapse during deep dives. He didn't look at me, not really. His eyes stayed fixed on Adrian. We're going with Adrian's design, he said flatly. It's practical. We need results, not endless hypotheticals. The words hit harder than I'd like to admit. I tried to argue, showing him the data I'd spent months compiling, but he brushed it aside with a single line I'd heard my whole life. Don't be clever, be correct. Within weeks, I was off the team. Officially, they said I was transitioning to other projects, but I knew better. It was Adrian's promotion, my father's hand-picked protege, taking the lead on the vessel I had practically built from scratch. I stayed late one night, long after everyone had gone home, combing through the internal project logs. That's when I found it. A buried evaluation report. My name was on the cover page, but the words beneath it weren't mine. Dr. Elena Drayton is highly intelligent but overly theoretical. Her methods are not suited for practical leadership. Recommend reassignment. The signature at the bottom was my father's. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the page, my hands trembling. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into his office. I just felt something inside me break, as if I had finally understood where I stood in his world, not as his daughter, but as a tool that had outlived its usefulness. I walked out that night with nothing but a rolled-up copy of my original pressure stabilization schematic. It was hand-drawn, covered with my notes, the kind of design no one could erase because it lived in my mind as much as on paper. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just handed in my badge and slipped out the side door. As I locked my apartment that night, I made myself a promise. If Aquila fails, they'll know why. The live test was broadcast from the command center like a spectacle. Investors, media, and naval officials watching as the Aquila One descended into the Mariana Trench. I wasn't supposed to be involved anymore, but I had kept one thread of connection, a private data feed I'd set up years earlier, hidden under a generic test server name. It was my way of checking in, of confirming whether my worst fears about Adrian's design would ever surface. At first, everything looked fine. The vessel moved smoothly past 5,000 meters, its pressure sensors responding as they should. Adrian was front and center in the command room, grinning like he'd already won. My father stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding approvingly. Then, at 6,800 meters, I saw it, a sudden spike in thermal readings. Small but sharp enough to make my chest tighten. The propulsion chamber's temperature curve began to drift outside the safe range. On my monitor, the data rolled across the screen, matching the exact scenario I had simulated years ago. I muttered to myself, there it is, the compression instability. In the broadcast feed, I watched Adrian's expression falter as alarms lit up behind him. Engineers scrambled, shouting technical jargon, trying to recalibrate the chamber. But I knew they were too late. The core engine was entering a feedback loop. heat and pressure feeding each other in a way that could only end in a full system failure. "Abort the dive!" Someone yelled in the control room. My father didn't move. I recognized that look, stubborn, unwilling to admit error. But when the vessel lurched on the telemetry data, dipping into a dangerous angle, even he couldn't deny it. The emergency retrieval sequence kicked in. The descent was over. By the time the Aquila one was hauled back to the surface, the public stream had already cut off. Investors were on edge, and international partners were questioning whether the vessel could ever be trusted again. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the numbers, the graphs, the failure logs. Every line of data confirmed what I had predicted the night I walked away. Adrian's design couldn't survive the trench. For a moment, I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but instead, all I felt was this deep, heavy ache. It could have been avoided. Years of silence had bought me nothing but the bitter satisfaction of watching a preventable disaster unfold. I closed my laptop and whispered to no one. You could have listened. 2 days after the failed dive, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something about the area code made me hesitate. Elena Drayton? The voice was smooth, confident. "This is Marcus Renwick, CEO of Oceanus Technologies. I believe you know the Aquila one." I froze. "Yes," I said carefully. "I've reviewed the test failure," he continued, "and I found something. In the archived files, there's a detailed report, one flagged as dismissed. It has your name on it." My chest tightened. "You read it?" I did. It predicted, almost line for line, the malfunction we just experienced. I want to know why no one acted on it. The question burned like an old wound. "Because my father decided I wasn't practical enough to lead," I said bitterly, "and because Adrian Trent was his golden boy." There was a pause on the other end, as if Marcus was measuring his words. "Admiral Drayton's pride doesn't concern me. I need results, and I think you can give me what I need." I leaned back, skeptical. Why come to me now? The project made it clear I was expendable? "Because you're not. I want you to return, on your terms, full autonomy over pressure system adjustments, access to all data, whatever you need." It felt like a trap, or maybe just too good to be true. "I don't work under people who erase my name," I said. "Not anymore." "I'm not asking you to," Marcus replied. "I'm asking you to lead. I'll handle the politics. You handle the engineering." I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted to the rolled schematic on my desk, the one I kept all these years. "Send me the telemetry data from the test," I said finally. "If it matches my models, I'll consider it." 10 minutes later, an encrypted file arrived. I opened it, scanning the numbers. Every detail matched my warnings. My design could have prevented all of it. I took a deep breath and called him back. "All right, Marcus," I said. "I'll fix your vessel, but I do it my way." The research bay was buzzing with tension when I walked in, my boots echoing on the polished concrete floor. 50 engineers stood in clusters around the massive frame of the Aquila One, their voices dropping to whispers as they saw me. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few simply turned away, as if acknowledging me might cause trouble. And then I saw him. Admiral Victor Drayton. My father stood near the control consoles, arms crossed, his uniform crisp as always. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. "What is she doing here?" His voice cut through the hum of machinery like a blade. Before I could answer, Marcus Renwick stepped forward, all calm confidence. "She's here because I asked her to be," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "As of today, Dr. Elena Drayton has full authority over the pressure stabilization and final adjustments. Her design is the foundation of this vessel, and she's the one who will save it." My father's jaw tightened. "This is a military-backed project. I will not—" "You will," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "This isn't about rank or ego, Admiral. It's about success. And right now, success means trusting the one person who warned you about this failure years ago." The room went silent. For a moment, I thought my father might order me out again, but he said nothing. He just stared at me, his eyes as cold as the day I left. Adrian Trent was standing off to the side, arms folded. He didn't smirk this time. He didn't say anything at all. He just looked cornered. I set my bag down and rolled up my sleeves. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "Let's see what I'm working with." I approached the vessel's pressure chamber, running my hand over the steel surface as if feeling for its heartbeat. It felt both familiar and foreign, my design altered by someone else's shortcuts. I took out a set of custom tools I'd built during my years away. tools no one here had seen before. "You're going to do this by hand?" one engineer asked, doubt lacing his tone. "By hand," I confirmed, crouching to remove a panel. "If you want precision, you start where the numbers meet the metal." There was a shift in the room. People leaned in, watching me work. My movements were calm, deliberate. I pointed out stress points no one else had noticed and corrected minor alignment flaws as I went. Adrian stayed silent. My father's stare never softened. But the engineers, I could feel them beginning to trust me, their skepticism fading as they saw how effortlessly I understood the vessel. For the first time in years, I wasn't just defending my place here, I was taking it back. By midnight, the research bay was nearly empty. Most of the engineers had gone home, but I stayed. I wasn't leaving until I knew exactly why the Aquila's systems had failed and how to fix them. I spread the technical schematics across a long workbench, adding my own handwritten notes in the margins. The original blueprint I'd drawn years ago sat next to Adrian's updated design, and the differences made my jaw tighten. He'd replaced a flexible damper ring with a rigid titanium component, probably thinking it would strengthen the structure. In reality, it created a thermal bottleneck, the very instability I had predicted. Adrian lingered on the far side of the room, watching me with an unreadable expression. He wasn't gloating anymore, not after the failure. He just stood there, silent, as if waiting for me to confirm what he already feared. I grabbed a marker and sketched a modified design on the whiteboard. "This," I said aloud to no one in particular, "is how you keep the chamber breathing with the pressure shifts. The material needs to flex, not fight the forces." The solution wasn't complicated for me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small alloy sample, a composite I had developed during my years away. It was lighter than steel, but capable of distributing thermal load without cracking. I placed it on the table with a soft metallic tap. "This is what should have been here all along." A younger engineer, one of the few who had stayed, stepped closer. "You made that yourself?" I nodded, running my fingers over its smooth surface. Every part of the Aquila has to work like a heartbeat. If one chamber stiffens, the whole system seizes up. It has to feel alive down there. For the next few hours, I worked non-stop, adjusting the chamber alignment, rewriting calibration codes, designing new gaskets on the fly. My hands were stained with graphite by the time I looked up. Adrian was still watching. For once, he looked like he wanted to say something, but he stayed quiet. Maybe he was finally realizing that this was never about theory. It was about survival at depths no one else dared to test. When the first light of dawn streamed through the high windows, I rolled the new blueprint and set it down on the table. "The Aquila one is ready," I said. "This time, it will not fail." The second test felt nothing like the first. The command room was packed again, but the energy was different, cautious, expectant, as if everyone was holding their breath. I stood at the console, headset on, my revised schematics running in real time on the monitors. "Lowering to 1,000 meters, a technician reported. The Aquila one, freshly modified and gleaming with the adjustments I'd made, sank through the dark water on the live feed. Every gauge showed stable readings. Adrian hovered a few feet behind me, silent. I didn't need to look back to know he was nervous. My father stood near the wall, arms folded tightly across his chest. His face gave nothing away, but I could feel the weight of his stare like a spotlight aimed at my back. At 4,000 meters, a ripple of tension went through the room. This was where the previous test had first shown signs of instability. I leaned forward, eyes fixed on the pressure charts. "All systems are green," I said, almost to myself. "Hold alignment steady and continue the descent." The vessel moved past 6,000 meters without a flicker. The telemetry graphs stayed smooth, the pressure dampeners flexing exactly as I designed them to. When it reached 9,000 meters, the threshold that had once seemed impossible, I finally exhaled. "Pressure stabilization is optimal," a technician called out, his voice breaking into a grin. "No thermal spikes. It's holding perfectly." The room erupted into applause, engineers clapping and exchanging relieved smiles. Even Marcus Renwick allowed himself a rare grin as he turned to me. "Well done, Drayton. You just gave this project its future." I glanced toward my father. He didn't clap, he didn't say anything, but for the first time, I realized I didn't need him to. The Aquila's flawless performance was all the validation I would ever require. "Bring her back up," I said, my voice steady. "She's ready." As the vessel began its ascent, I allowed myself a quiet moment. Years of silence, dismissal, and doubt had led to this point, And standing there, surrounded by the people who had once questioned me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The debrief room was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Charts from the successful dive were projected on the wall, every line steady and perfect. A half dozen senior executives sat around the table, looking at me with something I hadn't seen from them before. Respect. Marcus Renwick cleared his throat. I've reviewed every log, every report, and every buried recommendation. The data is clear. Dr. Elena Drayton's warnings could have prevented our earlier failure. The words hung in the air. No one argued. Adrian sat 2 seats down from me, shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the table. He looked like a man who had finally run out of excuses. Without a word, he reached into his jacket and placed a small flash drive in front of me. I glanced at him. "What is this?" "It's your design files," he said quietly. "The ones that were deleted when you left." I I thought they were gone, but I kept a copy. I was wrong about you." The admission surprised me, but I didn't say anything. I just picked up the drive and slipped it into my pocket. Marcus turned to the executives. "Effective immediately, I am updating all project records to reflect Dr. Drayton's role as lead systems architect. Her original pressure stabilization design is the backbone of the Aquila One, and it's time that fact is acknowledged." A murmur of agreement moved through the room. I felt no surge of pride, no desire to celebrate. It wasn't victory, it was just the truth finally restored. When the meeting ended, people approached me with handshakes and quiet congratulations. I smiled politely, but my mind was elsewhere. I noticed who wasn't there. My father hadn't come. He hadn't even called after the successful dive. Part of me had expected this. Victor Drayton was not a man who apologized, not even when faced with proof he had been wrong. Still, the empty chair where he should have been felt heavier than all the recognition in the room. As I walked out, Marcus caught my arm. "You did more than save this project, Elena. You changed how everyone sees it. Don't forget that." I nodded, though my thoughts were far away. Recognition from strangers was one thing, but the silence from my father reminded me that some battles weren't meant to be won, only accepted. 3 months after the Aquila's triumphant dive, I walked away from the boardroom table for the last time. Marcus Renwick had offered me a permanent leadership position on the project, a seat that would keep me tethered to the corporate battles and politics I'd fought so hard to escape. I thanked him, but I said no. I wanted something different, something that wasn't about proving my worth to a man who would never say I was enough. I founded the Drayton Institute for Girls in Engineering in a converted naval warehouse on the coast of Maine. It smelled faintly of salt water and machine oil, the kind of place where I could teach the language of gears, circuits, and fluid dynamics without judgment. The first time I watched a girl weld her first clean seam or sketch a propulsion concept with absolute confidence, I knew I had chosen the right legacy. "Trust your design," I told them, echoing a lesson I wish someone had told me when I was their age. You don't need permission to create something extraordinary. The institute grew quickly, drawing the daughters of naval veterans, local students with wild ideas, and young engineers who had been told no too many times. I spent long evenings reviewing their projects, guiding them, not with my father's sharpness, but with the encouragement my mother would have given me. One rainy afternoon, a package arrived on my desk with no return address. I almost didn't open it, but something about the handwriting stopped me. Inside was a photograph. Me as a child, no older than 8, standing next to my father on the deck of an old destroyer. I was grinning, holding up a crude model of a submersible we'd built together. He looked younger, less stern, almost proud. Beneath the photo was my original pressure stabilization blueprint, the one I thought had been lost. Scrawled across the margins, in his unmistakable hand, were notes. Small corrections, but also a line at the bottom. "You were right. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." For a moment, I just sat there, tracing the faded pencil marks with my fingers. I felt no surge of triumph, no flood of anger, only a quiet peace. I pinned the blueprint on the institute's main wall where the girls could see it every day. "This," I told them, "is proof that even the hardest walls can be broken down, if you keep building, no matter who doubts you." As I watched them crowd around the drawing, their faces lit with curiosity and pride, I realized I didn't need my father's validation anymore. I was building something greater than a name or a project. I was building a future where no one would have to earn the right to be heard, and that was enough.